The world is seeing a move towards younger leaders. Do the under-40s, if you regard that as younger, offer a fresh approach to sometimes jaded democracies? Or could they do with a few more years at the coalface? This is Roundtable with me, David Foster. They are often elected on the promise of change and move away from the traditional political establishment towards perhaps something a little bit more progressive. A new generation, different ideas. So what impact could young heads of state have on social and economic structures in their countries, indeed across the wider world?
Voices of a new generation. At just 31, Austria's conservative leader Sebastian Kurtz is Europe's first millennial head of state. His populist rhetoric to revitalize an establishment party losing popularity paid off.
Der heutige Tag ist ein historischer. Der heutige Tag ist unsere Chance, die Führung in diesem Land zu übernehmen und für echte Veränderungen in Österreich zu sorgen. Vielen Dank euch dafür.
He's in a growing group of under-40s who are joining the ranks of world leaders. Are we seeing a shift towards younger leaders? Sworn into office at just 47 years of age, Barack Obama remains one of the youngest people to ever hold the US presidential office. In 2014, at 39 years of age, Matteo Renzi was appointed Italy's youngest ever prime minister.
Sappia che è il tempo del coraggio e che questo tempo del coraggio non esclude nessuno e non lascia alibi a nessuno.
Nicknamed the Demolition Man for his attitude towards the political establishment, Renzi was known for dressing casually, in jeans with shirt sleeves rolled up. In France, the country's youngest head of state since Napoleon, 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron revolutionized European politics by launching a new centrist party. But do younger politicians have what it takes? The latest polls suggest that the majority of French voters are now dissatisfied with Macron's performance, just 6 months into the role. The 39-year-old has suffered the worst drop in popularity for a French president in 20 years. In Austria, EU officials have raised concerns about 31-year-old Sebastian Kurtz. The conservative leader plans to form a coalition with Austria's far right, a step towards bringing the anti-immigration party back into government after more than a decade in opposition. Youthful enthusiasm and energy. For some voters, they offer hope for change. Others see a lack of life experience. Are young leaders the right people to lead the world? Or should the position of head of state be reserved for the more mature politician?
I'm joined at the roundtable today by Professor and Political Analyst Stephen Barber from the University of Bedfordshire. Also here, Michael Cottakis, President of the EU think tank, the 1989 Generation Initiative. And we have Labour Councillor Mete Coban. Welcome to you all. Mete, I'm going to start with you since you're the youngest sitting at this table. You're 25, you were a councillor at 21. I knew nothing at 21. What did you bring to the table?
Well, I think I brought a fresh approach, and it's understanding the issues that young people care about. Because too often when politicians or our media talk about the issues facing young people, we always talk about youth policy in the context of, like your park or your school, but we forget the real issues that affect young people, such as housing, for example. In London, more than the first-time buyers' average age is 39. The average first-time buyer spends £420,000 on a new property, and these are issues that actually affect young people more than other issues.
But what does it take as a 21-year-old to be taken seriously by the oldies?
Well, it takes resilience. It's normal that, and it's unfortunate that it is a way where you are always going to be perceived to have less knowledge and experience, but it takes resilience to continue, and also a good support network, and I was very lucky to have that when I was running at the age of 20.
You see, the thing is, Michael and Stephen, I mean, you talked about perceived to have less knowledge and less experience. Well, it's an actual fact, isn't it?
Well, it is an actual fact, but there is also a question of competence. Competence is very important. If someone takes the time to inform themselves and become fully involved and immersed in an issue, then why not challenge someone who has more perceived experience? Knowledge is a very important thing.
Well, I mean, I think the truth is that you can have older leaders who are absolutely terrible, and you can have younger leaders who are terrible, and young leaders who are good, and older leaders who are good. It's not necessarily an age issue. I mean, I just wanted to pick up something. You opened this package saying there is a trend towards younger leaders. I'm not sure that's necessarily true. And I
New Zealand, Canada...
Well, there's certainly instances of it. There's certainly something that's happening. But I'd be very careful about saying this is a trend that is completely unique. I mean, you talked in the package there...
We said a move. I didn't think you said it was a trend.
OK, but even in the package there, you said that you picked up Clinton Obama. But of course, what we didn't talk about was last year's election, when it was Clinton again as the Democratic candidate at 69 versus Donald Trump, the oldest candidate to win in history, actually slightly older than Ronald Reagan.
But there is a trend, is there not? And you've written about it, Stephen, that shows that politicians these days have less and less life experience, but in the UK in particular.
I think, and it's also reflected around the world, but particularly in the UK, you can look at it. It's not historically unusual to have younger politicians and younger leaders. It's not historically unusual to have figures who have perhaps spent less time in the real world. But what is unusual is that we have a trend towards political leaders whose sole experience, and sometimes it's significant experience, but sole experience is political. They've been a special advisor to a minister or a front bench figure, and they're in that sense very professional politicians.
And does that turn off the young vote to these people?
100%, and I think we're seeing a shift away from that. I think what you've seen recently, I mean, even with Corbyn in the UK, I mean, I know Corbyn's had...
He's not, you couldn't describe him as young. A lot of things you could call him, but not young.
But I think the trend is that, more young people want to see more authenticity from their politicians. And, there was a recent research done by the British Council on the Next Generation, and one of the interesting facts was that 54% of young people did not believe that the issues that politicians spoke about reflect the issues that they care about. But at the same time, 73% of those believed that they should be engaging in politics. And I think that the trend towards young leaders or more young politicians is because what we're starting to look for is more authenticity from our politicians. And I don't think that...
I think this is a much bigger picture trend, funnily enough. And we're seeing the emergence of outsiders in politics, not simply young people, but also those who are not part of a traditional political elite. Macron, well, he's certainly part of a political elite, but he is young. So there are two types of politician emerging today. They are both fresh. One type of politician is young, the other type of politician is an outsider. He might be young, he might be old, but here what we are seeing, the common denominator is that they are different. They are not part of established political elites. Now here we're talking about a trend that began in the late 1970s, 1980s, a period of deindustrialization, which was conducted very rapidly. It was not offset with the type of investment that was needed to bring communities that had lost their core industries, coal and steel, back up to par, and the result is a backlash. We see this in the context also of the 2008 financial crash, particularly in Europe.
So it's not that there are brilliant people coming up, it's that people feel leaderless, perhaps, at the moment.
But it's interesting, because I think what both of you said there is true. But the populist voices railing against the results of deindustrialization, these aren't young voices necessarily. I mean, the populist figures on the right and left in Britain are both relatively old. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's 68, is he? And it's been perhaps on the right, Nigel Farage. In the United States, it was on the right, obviously the president now, Donald Trump, who's 70 years old. It was Bernie Sanders on the left, who's well into his 70s. These aren't young voices.
Yeah, but although I do think that one of the sort of common sort of patterns they have among them is that their policies do affect, well, they seem to be more engaging with young people. So I feel like where Corbyn was different to, say, the previous leader or other politicians is that when they come out to encourage young people to register to vote, it's just about process. Yes, go out, have your say. But whereas what Corbyn done differently was he engaged with young people through on issues, and that's what pulled them in.
Young people are engaging with a figure like Jeremy Corbyn who is older.
No matter what
it
age.
doesn't matter how old he is kind of the point. And perhaps the generation that epitomised that young professional politician were the baby boomers. It was the Blairs, the Clintons. You know, this was the generation who are now actually at retirement age, if you like. But that was the generation that did it. And they weren't speaking to young people. Perhaps, in a way, they marginalised young people and younger voices because what they were trying to do was win elections.
So let's get on to this particular point. I mean, I mentioned your youth at the very beginning of the programme. I wonder if you felt patronised when you went in, that people say, oh, he's young, I don't need to listen to him, he's going to make mistakes, and whether you found it difficult to change people's attitudes.
Definitely. I mean, when I first got elected, I never hide it. When I used to go into the council chamber and ask questions, people would often say, good question, Mete, after I come out. And I would say, well, why don't you say that to another councillor? But I guess, you know, it's up to you. You know, it's really important to be resilient. You got to, you know, the unfortunate truth is you probably have to work twice as harder to actually prove that, you know, you are capable to be hold that office. And that is one of the difficulties that you are.
So young women, because women often have to work twice as hard as men anyway, young women would be doubly disadvantaged at a young age, perhaps.
Exactly. And when we talk about young people being underrepresented in politics, I always say, you know, there's even further than that. So, for example, if you're a young woman from ethnic minorities, from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, from immigrant background, from refugees, from LGBT communities, you're even more likely to face more barriers and more difficult for you to get involved.
Michael, when you're taking your ideas to Europe, you know, and you're saying this is what we would like to do, are they specifically directed at the 1989 brackets? Age group, or do they concern everybody in so many different ways?
They're not specifically youth policies. We're dealing with bigger picture issues that the youth have certainly a stake in. So we're dealing with foreign policy, we're dealing with economic policy, we're dealing with bigger picture policies, policy apparatuses, big reforms. Young people need to have their say, and they need to have their voices heard, and the 1989 Generation Initiative provides a platform for them to be heard. And it is not a case of simply talking about the youth. The youth have a stake in big issues, and they must discuss those and be heard on those.
Well, I mean, just made me think, of course, the issue historically, and it hasn't been the case in very recent elections in Britain, but historically, younger people are less active in mainstream politics. They might get involved in campaigning and different things, but party politics, young people have a very poor record at turning out to vote. And as a result of that, well, if a politician trying to win an election has to make a choice between upsetting older people and upsetting younger people, they're going to upset younger people because they're not going to vote.
Yes, and the result of that is what Mete has experienced in the Labour Party. Parties become entrenched, they become institutionalised, and the institutionalisation is linked also to an older generation of people working.
Also, I think we're missing, you know, the big elephant in the room, which is Brexit, which it has politicised the generation in the UK, just like the Scottish referendum politicised the youth in Scotland. That is what Brexit done, and my work for...
And has done generationally, actually.
Of course, yeah, and, you know, my work for My Life, My Say, which is all about securing a better Brexit for young people. I mean, we found from the recent research that we've done with the London School of Economics is that actually young people want to talk about, as well as educational opportunities, around the economy. So, for example, when I went to Portsmouth, we met so many young people there who was actually concerned about immigration because they felt that, you know, the massive influx of Eastern Europeans into Portsmouth took away their job opportunities, and they felt that Brexit was an opportunity to get that back. I mean, whether that's true, that's a different argument. But the point is that Brexit has politicised the generation, and it was no surprise when you had the high youth turnout in the last election, because there's just so many issues in this country that young people want to have a say in.
There was a young man some generations ago. I want to read this to you and see if you can guess who it might be, and then comment on the fact that he was young at the time, but perhaps his policies didn't change. It says, undoubtedly he will make the mistakes of immaturity, but there is little doubt that in the future his country will be a freer and healthier country. Now, who might you think that was? I'm not going to leave a big gap in the programme by not telling you, but would you be surprised if I told you that was Fidel Castro? Yes. Immaturity, very young man, considered that one day, this was a London newspaper writing this, he would make a freer and fairer country. So do we not imbue youth, perhaps unfairly, with hope, when in fact the reality is often something different?
Well, in a sense, you have to, because if you haven't got experience, you've got hope, haven't you? And hope, on the whole, triumphs over experience, I think, history shows, electoral history shows, and it was Barack Obama's mantra was hope, wasn't it? Bill Clinton's, the audacity of hope.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton, I come from a town called Hope. Hope's very attractive electorally.
Absolutely. I mean,
the mistakes of youth as well.
The mistakes of youth, yes, we do. We try to learn from them. We hope that history learns from them as well. But hope, we must not underestimate the importance of hope in politics. And young people bring.
But the other wonderful thing is that mistakes of youth are forgiven, whereas the mistakes of middle and older age are put down as sort of, one mistake is okay, two is ridiculous, and three is, well, forget you. You can make as many mistakes as you like at a certain age.
I wouldn't buy that. I think, it's a fair playing field, and I think we face more difficult challenges than the old generation would face. So I think, maybe some things will go in our favour, but some things will go against our favour in different ways. And
when you're dealing with that level of politics, no hope is excusable.
I'm interested actually in Mete here as a councillor, because in terms of a route into national politics, being a councillor is a pretty long-established background. And actually that hasn't changed over many, many years. What has changed, and the research has shown this, is that the professional politicians tend to be the ones nowadays, notwithstanding the fact we've got three party leaders who are different, are older and not professional politicians, if you like. But professional politicians tend to get elected into Parliament and then very, very rapidly promoted to the front bench. Happened with the likes of Cameron, Clegg, Miliband and all the rest. There are still the same sort of number of former councillors in Parliament, but they tend to do all the running of it. They run the committees, they make sure the legislation's looked at properly. They make the place run. And I just wondered how you view that as a young councillor who perhaps has political ambitions.
I mean, for me personally, I must just say, my route into politics is more because I'm from Hackney, and it's an area of high levels of deprivation, and I grew up there. So for me, what was really important is that when we have growth and prosperity, it benefits the locals, and that's why I got into politics. It's not because of
If somebody said to you one day you could have a cabinet post, would your heart quicken, or would you want to leave the room as quickly as possible?
A cabinet position nationally, or
nationally.
I mean, it depends whether I'm right for it at the time. Who knows, where you are, whether it's right for the people, whether it's right for the portfolio. I think that's what.
But my point is, if you were to enter Parliament, say, in the future, with a background as a councillor, you would have some pretty good experience. You wouldn't be being interviewed as the young person, what do you know kind of thing. Yeah. You'd have serious experience. Would that set you up, do you think, to be one of these heroes of Parliament who make the place work and make sure we've got half-decent legislation, or would it be a route into front bench combative, leadership type of territory?
I think it can be both, and I think it depends on your ambition and where you are in terms of publicly.
Well, New Zealand's Prime Minister, long-term party member, still under 40. She's been in the party for, 20-something years?
Yeah.
So it is a way in. But I want to broaden this slightly, if I may, and say, what difference does being a young politician make to the people you feel you represent? Have you been able to change anything because of your age?
I think so, 100%. I think, because you bring a fresh approach and you understand the issues that other people face. We live in a representative democracy, and all groups and societies, and no matter what you look like, should be represented in our democracy. And essentially, I think, I'm not saying everyone that represents our chamber should be young. Of course, there should be people from all different walks of life. But I think being young, of course, you understand the issues that your generation faces more than other generations face. And I think that's one of the, especially when we talk about consultation or how do we engage around policy, too often it only favours a certain type of group in our society, especially when we look at the fact that we're not educated about how politics or, how we're not educated about our councils or what our government does. And a lot of young people are, of course, interested about the issues that affect them, but the problem is whether they see politics as a vehicle to address the issues that they care about. And I think having younger politicians enables you to bring that fresh approach and understand the issues they care about.
The 1989 initiative, I mean, you're a 1990 child, I think I'm right in saying, yes?
Correct.
Have you made a difference for young people?
We provide young people with a platform to speak about their ideas for the European Union. We are not simply an organisation based at the London School of Economics or in the UK. We are a pan-European organisation, and we offer a pan-European platform for people to get involved and have their say. Now, Whether we can make a difference depends on our critical mass, how many young people we get involved, and whether we can transfer our policy recommendations directly into government. That's about coalition building. That's about the right connections. Connections are absolutely important, crucial in politics, as you would have understood from your time in the Labour Party.
I'm not glazing over, because it's all very interesting, but I'm wondering if people, you're 27?
27.
27, you're 25. If a lot of people might say, for goodness sake, get a life. Get out there, do something wild, do something wilder than running through a wheat field, as Theresa May did. How do you square those two things? I mean, we were joking beforehand. You won a best hair competition when you were working for Sadiq Khan. There is a side to you all that is not so serious. It's just real human beings, isn't it?
Yes, but what more important issue than trying to help society?
Yeah.
What more important issue than being a social, political entrepreneur and trying to create better conditions for the people that you represent?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think for me, it's always been, partly because of my background and the way I was brought up, and I couldn't go to secondary school in the area that I was brought up in because all the schools were getting shut down. So for me, it's always been a passion to help people. And of course, you can still have your fun within those places, as you said.
I'm sorry to sort of...
We can still have our hair elections.
I'm not mocking. So what happens here? Do earnest young people become earnest older politicians, or do they actually sort of just change as we all?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of making me think listening to this this discussion. Notwithstanding what I was saying earlier about this trend towards professional politicians, of course, what Britain has at the moment are 3 political leaders who are actually relatively old. I think we've got the oldest lineup of the 3 political leaders since Churchill, Davis and Attlee back in 1945. And not only that, we've got 3 people who all served as councillors in their early life. They've all had a career of sorts. Certainly, Jeremy Corbyn had a very long apprenticeship. And Jeremy Corbyn's attracting younger voters, maybe making them, politicising them. The question is whether they will stay engaged or whether they'll end up being disappointed, and that's the question.
And therefore, the further point is, are they actually going to make a real difference on the macro level rather than just on the small level when you talk about social housing, when you talk about sort of representation? Are younger politicians going to change the world?
Well, potentially, yeah. Why not? I mean, we're the future, and we talk about Brexit in this country. Then we're going to live with the outcome the longest, and we should have our say. And that's why, My Life, My Say, that's why we set up the all-party parliamentary group on a better Brexit for young people, because we wanted a structured engagement platform between young people and decision makers where you could scrutinise the process and actually put forward good, credible research and work with government. It's about that coalition building that we spoke about as well, to be able to influence that policy, and I think we should be at the forefront of it.
Jump in, Stephen.
First of all, I'm not sure we are seeing a generation of younger politicians swooping in necessarily. I think there are instances of it, but I'm
But you could apply this to any other era, could you?
Yes, a little bit. I think what you are tapping into there, and I think this is true, is that there is a real split now between older and younger generations. Yeah. In Britain, older generations hold all of the wealth, most of the public benefits. Younger people are paying for it. Yeah. Older people made that decision over Brexit. Younger people will have to live with it for much longer. And so there is perhaps a division that is different from in the past.
There's also a demographic issue as well.
Yes, we're getting an much older population.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a larger cross-section of the population is old, and it's a much smaller cross-section of the population.
Older retired, a young one that will never be able to retire.
Absolutely. And if you compare that to the rest of the world, compare the West to the rest of the world, you see far larger cross-sections of populations being young in Africa, in Asia, and we have a comparative disadvantage.
But you also have a growing ageing population in places like China and Asia as well. So, I mean, it sort of balances out to some extent.
But if we are talking about Europe and we're talking about young people making a difference, there are fewer of us to make a difference.
Hopeful about the future as a young person, or incredibly fed up, like so many young people seem to be, that they're not getting the crack of the whip that they want?
I think, issues present opportunities, and I think there's an opportunity to rethink how we do politics in this country and across the West. I think it's clear that some things haven't been working the way it has. So I think what we need to do, it's a bit like the football analogy I always give. For a long time, we always was opposed to goal line technology because we thought that it would damage the way in which we play our football. And I think it's the same thing with politics there. We're too used to our traditions, but the reality is we've moved on so much, both in terms of new forms of communication and technology, and it's about updating our democracy to be able to suit the needs of.
Do you want to give us a quick thought on what we should be looking at to see whether there is proper change?
Sure. I mean, I think what I was thinking of there as you were speaking is, you are right, if young politicians are to make a real difference in this country or other kind of Western democracies, it is about that. It's changing how we make these democratic decisions, not just what those decisions are. Permanently changing the structure so that people are properly represented. And a lot of the problems we have now are that simply parliaments don't represent the people that
One of the prerogatives of age? I've got to say that's it. May I quote, well, he was a young man certainly when he wrote it, William Shakespeare, to round up this programme. One of his quotes on youth was, "Crabbed age and youth cannot live together. Youth is full of pleasure, age is full of care." But perhaps this is the best one for this programme. What a terrible era in which idiots govern the blind. From me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team, and my guest today, thank you for watching. We hope to see you next time. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Bye-bye.